Time Magazine Backlash is Caitlyn Clark snubbed for Women of the Year and A'ja Wilson award due thrust upon us that Time Magazine was naming A'ja Wilson one of the Women of the Year. Now I think there's like 10 or 12 of them. That's in this magazine. I think 12 that were in this magazine. And of course it has to do with, hey, who inspired women, Transcendent, yada, 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 right? Who had a massive influence in all things involving women. You're not going to believe this one. Nope, not even in your wildest dreams. Just when you thought Caitlyn Clark had conquered it all, here comes Time Magazine with the most ridiculous move of the year. And guess who's right in the middle of it? A'ja Wilson at this point. They're just making things up for fun. I had to double check if this was some elaborate joke, but nope, it's real, and trust me, you're going to want to hear every single detail. Where was Caitlyn Clark exactly in this? Why couldn't you put A'ja on this list and Caitlyn Clark? Because when you really think about it, and I don't know why I didn't really bring this up yesterday, why the hell hadn't Caitlyn Clark on this list? Let's just come out with it. Let's just put it out there. Why was she not on this list? It's kind of unforgivable, to be honest. When you really start thinking about it, it's rather confusing. Time Magazine really thought they could skip over Caitlyn Clark for one of the awardees of Women of the Year, when literally she just won Athlete of the Year, male or female, a few months ago. And no one would know this. Like, seriously, we weren't supposed to see that. We weren't supposed to have questions. So the 23-year-old basketball phenom got the Athlete of the Year award. The honor, what's the big woo? Well, Time recently unveiled their Women of the Year issue. And guess who didn't make the cut? Caitlyn Clark. I'm not sure how a woman can win Athlete of the Year award and then fail to be named one of the best women of 2024. As the kids say, the math ain't mathing. Caitlyn Clark is literally the most famous women's basketball player in the world right now. She's got record-breaking stats, the highest viewership numbers, and is single-handedly dragging women's basketball into the mainstream. Yet somehow, someway, she wasn't even a nominee. But guess who was? A'ja Wilson. Dear friend, Caitlyn Clark did not make the cut, folks. Don't overreact. Don't get angry. Don't get frustrated. Don't be surprised. I don't think anybody should be surprised by this. And this isn't A'ja Wilson's fault. This is just Time Magazine doing what Time Magazine does now. Let's break this down because none of it makes sense. Caitlyn Clark has single-handedly made women's basketball the biggest story in sports media. She's got the NBA begging her to join their All-Star Game, celebrities tweeting about her, and TV networks fighting for the rights to broadcast her games. She's not just a sports icon, she's a cultural movement, and oh yeah, she's dominant on the court, breaking 62 records during her freshman season. Calculated that Caitlyn Clark was responsible for $36 million in economic impact to the city of Indianapolis, and that she is responsible for 27% of the entire WNBA's economic activity for this past season, including attendance, merchandise sales, and television. One player in a big league responsible for 27% of the economic impact and economic activity for the WNBA. One person, more than a of it, she's responds. Her impact goes far beyond the court. Clark's presence in women's basketball is generating millions of dollars for the WNBA. Before she even stepped onto a professional court, ticket prices for Indiana Fever games skyrocketed to historic highs. The league is selling out arenas for the first time in years. ESPN and other major networks are scrambling to broadcast more WNBA games, all because of one player. Time Magazine backed themselves into a confusing corner with this latest blunder. This is a whiskey riff right here. When they crowned their Athlete of the Year last year, they did the right thing by giving the title to Indiana Fever star Caitlyn Clark. Surprisingly, there was some backlash to the decision, which is absurd, with many in the WNBA saying the award should have been given to the entire league instead of just Clark. And yet Time Magazine completely ignored this cultural shift in favor of the safe, who always kept on whining why she never gets recognized. A'ja Wilson. Now, don't get it twisted. A'ja Wilson is a great player. She's been a WNBA champion. She's won masterpiece, and she's a dominant force on the court, but let's not pretend she's the one carrying the league into a new era. That credit belongs entirely to Caitlyn Clark, and still Clark's not even a footnote in Time Magazine's Woman of the Year list. This isn't just a snub. This is a joke. The Mystics owner went on CNN and was for becoming the face of the league overnight, and media personalities threw shade questioning if she was even that good. Would you know who A'ja Wilson was without Caitlyn Clark? I'm willing to bet you 65 to 70% of the very people that are watching the WNBA today did not know who she was at this time last year before the WNBA draft, and before they started actually playing games. And A'ja Wilson decided to run her mouth like, what was it, about 10 days, 2 weeks before the season started, when she went on this big, yeah, it's a black or white thing, and I don't like it that y'all don't want to recognize that. Meanwhile, A'ja Wilson, she gets nothing but praise, as if she's the one carrying the WNBA on her back, as if she's the reason this league is suddenly on everyone's radar. But let's be real, Caitlyn Clark is the one doing all the heavy lifting, the one breaking records, pulling in historic viewership numbers, and making the WNBA relevant to an audience that never cared before, yet somehow Time magazine ignored all of that and handed their Woman of the Year award to Wilson, as if Clark's impact meant nothing, who blew up women's sports. Caitlyn Clark, who influenced all of these little girls we saw in these games last year, right? At all these games all over the country, those little girls lined up of all ethnicities and races wearing their little 22 jerseys or t-shirts, wanting to see who and get who autographed Caitlyn Clark. There you go. I mean, I don't know what else to say, so let's ask the obvious question: what exactly did A'ja Wilson do to deserve this honor? Win a championship? That's cute, because while Wilson got her trophy, Caitlyn Clark won something way bigger. She won the battle of making the WNBA relevant, and that's a championship that no one in the league, not Wilson, not any other player, could have won. Without her, Wilson taking home Time's Woman of the Year is like handing the MVP trophy to a role player, while the real superstar is carrying the entire league on their back. It's like rewarding a solid contributor for consistency, while completely ignoring the game-changing talent that's redefining the sport. This is quite remarkable. I've never seen a professional league just actively attempt to tear apart their ultimate star. Washington Mystics owner Sheila Johnson wants to know why they couldn't have put the whole WNBA on the Time cover and called it the League of the Year. And of course she said that because her argument is Caitlyn Clark is not the only one that moved the needle for the WNBA. But no, let's reward the safe choice. Let's ignore the fact that Caitlyn Clark has been dealing with a league full of players who have a personal vendetta against her just for existing. Let's pretend like she wasn't getting fouled so hard that NBA players had to call it out. Let's act like she wasn't under more scrutiny than any WNBA player ever. Time magazine fumbled this one so badly, it's embarrassing. They had a chance to acknowledge the biggest game share in women's basketball history, and instead, it went with the safe, politically correct option, so they wouldn't upset the WNBA veterans who are still bitter about Clark's rise. Let's take a second right now to have a moment of silence for Washington Mystics owner Sheila Johnson, who suggested that the WNBA as a whole should have been on the cover of Time magazine instead of just Caitlyn Clark, who graced the cover last week, which is probably some of the stupidest I've ever heard. And A'ja Wilson, she had no problem accepting the award, knowing full well that Caitlyn Clark is the reason more people even know her name now. Wilson, who had zero issue taking the spotlight, while Clark was the one selling out arenas, generating millions in revenue, and making women's basketball must-watch TV. Now let's talk about Wilson's leadership, or rather the lack of it. This is the same A'ja Wilson who just a few months ago was throwing her own teammates under the bus, the same Wilson who publicly said that her locker room wasn't a championship locker room, blaming everyone but herself. When things didn't go her way, instead of leading her team, she was airing her frustrations to the media like she was on a reality TV show, and now she's the face of Time magazine. What it wasn't a championship locker room, Wilson said. I mean, out of the gate, going the training camp, I was like, we ain't got it. Wow, okay, that's crazy. I always told myself we're going to get it. We're going to check each box, but we didn't. Oh man, let's not forget, this is a player who for one season didn't get exactly what she wanted, and suddenly it was everybody else's fault. The teammates weren't championship material. The locker room wasn't up to her standards. The organization wasn't doing enough. But when they were winning, when everything was going her way, she was all smiles, taking all the credit, acting like the undisputed queen of the WNBA the moment adversity hit. Suddenly, she's got complaints. Interesting, A'ja Wilson, she kind of admitted that the Aces were not like championship ready this last season. She said specifically, it wasn't a championship locker room. I mean, out the gate, going into training camp, I was like, we ain't got it. I always told myself every game we're going to get there. We're going to check each box, but we didn't. And then she also went on, and then I actually just want to leave this here real quick. I mean, this to me, this shows no loyalty to your teammates. And this just shows also you felt like this wasn't the team to get to a championship. Now let's break this down real quick. A'ja Wilson is out here on Time magazine getting celebrated like she's the greatest thing to ever happen to basketball. Meanwhile, Caitlyn Clark, the actual biggest star in women's basketball, is being treated like she doesn't even exist. A'ja gets the magazine cover, Caitlyn Clark ignored. Make it make sense, and don't even get started on this whole barrier-breaking narrative they're pushing. A'ja Wilson is leading the way, where to what a second-round playoff exit, because that's what happened last year when she was blaming her own teammates for not meeting expectations. I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to try to be the best. I get y'all saying best player in the world. That's great. It looks great, but I want to be the best person. I want to be the best teammate. Cause that's how I get the best out of my team. Meanwhile, Caitlyn Clark is literally breaking records every other game. She's setting attendance records. She's getting more viewership than most NBA games, and yet she's is the one they keep trying to downplay. It's actually hilarious. A'ja Wilson is out here getting magazine covers, yet when the league needed a superstar to actually bring in fans, it wasn't her. That was Caitlyn Clark. You know, the same Caitlyn Clark who has been dealing with constant disrespect from the media, other players, even the one by itself. There's something about the way she plays the game or passing her shooting that people really identify with. I really feel like we're poised and we're set up for a great successful next era of Fever basketball. But A'ja, she's got Time magazines singing her praises like she's been carrying the league on her back. And let's not forget, A'ja Wilson was the same one crying about not getting enough MVP recognition a few months ago, talking about how she doesn't get the same respect as other stars, but respect is earned, not given. Caitlyn Clark never had to beg for attention. Her game made people pay attention. Meanwhile, A'ja has been in the league for years and is still out here complaining about respect. Maybe if she spent less time whining and more time elevating her game, she wouldn't have to beg for credit. A'ja Wilson is her name. Quote, "It doesn't matter what we all do as black women, we're still going to be swept underneath the rug. That's why it boils my blood when people say it's not about race, because it's the same narrative every single year. Anytime a star rises, there's always a group waiting to tear them down, and this time it's Caitlyn Clark again. But here's the problem. This ain't last year. This isn't a rookie anymore where teams could just rough her up and hope the refs look the other way, and things are different now. Caitlyn Clark has an army. Sydney Colson is a two-time one-but champion, a true vet, an amazing backup point guard, and anytime that Cece or any of the guards need to go to the bench, Sydney Colson always makes the right call, always makes the right decision. So to pick up a vet, a professional like Sydney Colson, and then you also have a vet like Danana Boner, and you also have a vet like Kelsey Mitchell, and then you have Cece and Aaliyah Boston and Lexi. She's got veterans who aren't here for the nonsense. Danana Bonner has seen it all and isn't about to let Clark be disrespected. Sydney Colson, she'll clown the haters on the court and then drag them on social media after the game. And let's not forget Sophie Cunningham, the one-buzz enforcer. You touch Caitlyn, Sophie's making sure you regret. It's like having a personal security team on the court. Sophie Cunningham is there to be basically the enforcer. She played a lot of the 5 at Phoenix. She literally played 1 through 5. She guarded 1 through 5 in Phoenix. There's maybe a not more versatile glue player in the one-ba than Sophie Cunningham. There are better players, there are more versatile players, but no more versatile glue players in 100K a year than Kingham. She's almost the one of a kind in what she does. Then there's head coach Stephanie White, a proven winner who knows exactly how to handle pressure. She's not about to let Caitlyn be treated like some random rookie. So now that Clark is lighting up the league, putting up ridiculous numbers and leading Indiana to wins, how? Like, I think it would have been nice if they had put the entire league on the off-front cover of Time magazine as Athlete of the Year. Well, there wasn't but one athlete that was moving all the numbers, all right, that was influencing all the money, gate, revenue, attendance ratings, all the stuff we've talked about, right? There's only one right, wrong, or indifferent, just one plays in Indiana, where it's 22 right. Caitlyn Clark had a historic year, not just a good year, a historic one. She was breaking records left and right, selling out arenas, and bringing in ratings the one-ba could have only dreamed of before she arrived. Meanwhile, A'ja Wilson's games were getting outviewed by reruns of The Price is Right. But she's Woman of the Year, yeah, okay, Time magazine. When you're talking about GOATs of the W, I need my name to be up there, at least top 3. Like, that's my goal, is like I want something like, when you're thinking of women's bas, when you're thinking of the W, I want my name to be on it. Come on, tell them, as takes like whatever it needs to get there, whether it's the rings, whether it's the accolades individually, like I want to be up there in that cat. And let's really talk about Wilson for a second. She's been in the one-ba for years, and outside of hardcore fans, nobody really cared. The only time people talk about the Las Vegas Aces is when they're bullying the rest of the league and blowout wins, yet somehow Wilson gets all the praise while Caitlyn Clark, the only player actually moving the needle, gets ignored from A'ja. There's days where I'm struggling. It's moments where no matter how hard you work, it still feels like you're not getting the recognition. It still feels like somebody's got to say something to say. I needed them to understand that they helped me in more ways than they'll ever know. It's hard showing up every day and wearing this crown. It's heavy. It gets extremely heavy. But at the same time, I'm going to fix it, make sure it's straight, and I'm going to go ahead and do my work. Oh, and let's really get into the backlash. Because the internet didn't just notice, people are furious. Sports analysts, journalists, and even casual fans are calling out Time magazine for one of the worst snubs in recent history. Even people who don't normally watch women's basketball are asking how Caitlyn Clark wasn't even in consideration. But here's where it gets even worse. This isn't just about Clark, it's about how women's sports get recognized in general. Time magazine had the perfect opportunity to highlight the single biggest force in women's athletics today. Someone who isn't just excelling in her sport, but actively changing it instead. They played it safe and went with the establishment choice. The Time chief executive officer even said herself that the list was recognizing visionary leadership and women who are inspiring global change. I'd say that Caitlyn Clark has done just that in the past couple years for the WNBA and women's sports at large. I mean, would your average sports fan even know who A'ja Wilson is if not for Caitlyn Clark? It's an excellent point, and that's what makes this even more infuriating. Time magazine had the opportunity to cement Clark's impact as a defining moment in sports history. Instead, they ignored the one player who has done more for women's sports in the past year than any other athlete on the planet. But that's not even the worst part. Time magazine's credibility is officially in shambles, because how do you claim to celebrate women making an impact and then ignore the one woman actually reshaping an entire sport? You know, A'ja Wilson has been nitpicking with Caitlyn Clark, almost like anything you can do, I can do better situation. And this is another case of that type of scenario, because Time magazine, let's pull it up right now. Now, I was stunned when I seen this goo. I was definitely stunned when I seen this. As you guys can see here, Time magazine has named A'ja Wilson, in which Jordan Childs definitely deserved this, a Jordan Childs Women of the Year. This wasn't an oversight. It was a deliberate decision, and now they're scrambling to defend it. While the backlash continues to grow, this isn't about recognizing true impact. This is about playing favorites, and Time magazine played the themselves. So now Caitlyn Clark fans aren't just mad, they're making noise, and the next time Time magazine tries to pretend they care about sports, nobody's going to take them seriously. What are we talking about, man? All you got to do is be a teammate of Caitlyn Clark, or have a robbery with Caitlyn Clark, or have an incident dust up with Caitlyn Clark, or say something slick about Caitlyn Clark on Twitter. Let's talk about adversity, because if there's one player who has had to deal with more hate than any rookie in WNBA history, it's Caitlyn Clark. From the second she stepped into the league, it felt like half the WNBA was out to get her. Players took cheap shots at her on the court. WNBA veterans mocked her. Exactly. Are they going to keep disrespecting her? What's the excuse this time? Oh, it's just the regular season. She's playing with a good team. The league is carrying her now. The only thing being carried is the big L these haters are taking when Caitlyn Clark is holding up a trophy at the end of the season. And speaking of haters, let's talk about the media. If Clark drops 35 points, they say it wasn't efficient enough. If she gets a double-double, they call it stat padding. It's never ending, and we're tired of it. Play Clark will be legitimate WNBA contender in 2025. The Indiana Fever star is building a historic rookie season to challenge A'ja Wilson for the 2025 WNBA honors. Now I told y'all, bro, Caitlyn Clark is standing on business next to A'ja, bro. She want that MVP trophy. She need that trophy. She winning all the awards right now, but she need that one on the list A'd. And then there's A'ja Wilson. Oh, you thought we forgot? Nope, she's part of the problem too, acting like Caitlyn. Isn't that good? Like she hasn't been doing this for years. When Clark wasn't in the league, they said she wouldn't be good enough. Now that she's dominating, they're still moving the goal post, but none of it matters, because at the end of the day, all Caitlyn Clark does is win. And what are they going to say then when she's holding up the MVP trophy and leading Indiana to the finals? Simple answer. They can't say anything. Do you agree? Let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss out. Click the video on the screen, and we will see you in the next one.